Get ready to spice up your garden. Today, we're joined by Master Gardener and pepper aficionado Gail Pothour. You'll discover the incredible health benefits of growing peppers, from boosting metabolism to supporting heart health, and you'll learn practical tips for growing these colorful fruits in your summer garden. Plus, we have insights on a delightful array of pepper varieties, both sweet and spicy, that will leave you inspired to make your garden sizzle this growing season. It's episode 390, Pepper Growing Basics. We're podcasting from Barking Dog Studios here in the beautiful Abutilon jungle in suburban Purgatory. It's the Garden Basics with Farmer Fred podcast, brought to you today by Dave Wilson Nursery. Let's go. There's a lot of great reasons to grow peppers in your summer garden. Peppers are good for you. It's one of the healthiest foods you can eat. They're packed with nutrients like vitamin C, vitamin A, antioxidants. It contributes to overall health. They have other benefits too. Eating peppers boosts your metabolism. It supports heart health and can potentially reduce inflammation. Besides all that, it supports heart health. Peppers are a good source of potassium, which helps maintain healthy blood pressure and a cardiovascular function. It reduces inflammation, which is a key factor in many chronic diseases. Plus, all that fiber can promote healthy digestion and gut health. It supports eye health. It may combat cancer as well. Bell peppers. Let's find out more about how to grow peppers in your yard. We're talking with Sacramento County Master Gardener Gail Pothour. She's also a vegetable expert. She knows her peppers as well. She's a big sweet pepper fan, and we'll talk about both sweet peppers and hot peppers. And Gail, we've talked in previous episodes about starting peppers from seed, and that's a long, slow process. For example, I started my pepper seeds back in January, and they're finally ready to go in the ground here in late April.
As did I. I started mine the end of January. They have been moved up several times. They're now in 1-gallon pots, and they're just about ready to go in the ground as soon as everything's warm enough, which at the horticulture center, I believe we're going to plant them at our next work day. So it's going to be a couple weeks earlier than we typically do.
There are just so many good things you can do with peppers. You can eat them raw, you can saute them, you can put them in a myriad of dishes. Heck, you can make pepper relish with it. You can make pepper soup. What do you like to do with the finished product?
Oh, I will either, if I have a plethora of them, I will just slice them and freeze them. Don't blanch them or anything, just freeze them, and I use them all winter. I also like to make red pepper pesto. I make a lot of that, put it in ice cube trays and freeze it. I can pull it out to make a quick dinner. And I use it in a dish called mahamra, which is Middle Eastern red pepper dip that's kind of a little spicy. I have to make it not so spicy, but yeah, I put them in almost everything, whether it's an Asian stir fry, a Mexican pasta dish, whatever. I always put sweet bell peppers in them.
All right, let's talk about the conditions that peppers like. I would imagine that, like most summertime vegetables that like heat, and the pepper is one that likes the heat, they prefer full sun, whatever that is.
Mm-hmm. They do. Now, you're talking about once they're transplanted into the ground?
Correct.
Or when you're starting? Okay. They do like to have full sun, which in our neck of the woods, we would say at least 6 to 8 hours of sun a day. However, in our hot afternoon west sun in the middle of summer, we often need to give them a little bit of shade.
That is so true. If there's one thing that does vex a lot of pepper growers here, and if you live in a hot summer area, especially when you get those little sections of a week or so of temperatures over 100 degrees or so, you might start seeing some ugly little brown spots on the sides of your peppers. And I bet that is facing either west or south.
Correct. Yeah, it would be sun scald. And often the pepper plants will have their fruit outside the foliage. So anything that's not covered by big leaves could get some sun scald. And it's the same thing that happens on tomatoes.
Now, we were just talking about planting peppers in late April, early May. Well, that's here in USDA Zone 9. For people in colder climates, I guess the rule of thumb is wait until the minimum soil temperature is about 55 degrees.
Yeah, I would say more like minimum of about 60. They like it a tad warmer than tomatoes do. The optimum soil temperature would be about 65 to 70 or so, but I would say at least 60 degrees for peppers.
The other rule of thumb is to wait for nighttime temperatures to be steadily over 50 or 55 degrees. depending upon your nighttime temperatures typically. But once it starts getting over 50, you can start thinking about it. And of course, it's always good to have a soil thermometer.
Absolutely, because if you have raised beds, the soil will warm up faster than if you're planting in the ground. So a soil thermometer can give you an idea of what the temperature is like in the soil. So it's always important. And the peppers will kind of sulk if it's too cool for them. Tomatoes often will snap out of it, but peppers sometimes will just sulk. So I'm always surprised when I see peppers for sale in garden centers in February that it's just way too early.
Oh, yes. The excuse that the people at the nursery will say is, well, these people are putting it in their greenhouse. Well, fine and dandy, but don't take them out of your greenhouse and plop them in the ground. They need to be hardened off, don't they?
Oh, absolutely. Any vegetable, I think, needs to be hardened off before you put it in your garden because you don't necessarily know what conditions they were growing at. They could have been just pulled from a greenhouse into the garden center. So they need to have at least a week or two of acclimating to the outdoor temperatures, the nighttime temperatures, the wind. It's a completely different environment than where they were in a greenhouse or indoors or even in a garden center where they maybe have shade cloth over them or protected some way.
What is the best way to plant a pepper, and what time of day is best for planting a pepper?
I would say whenever it's convenient to do it, but typically I would say maybe later afternoon so that it has all night to kind of acclimate. If you plant it in the middle of the afternoon and it's really hot, when we've been getting in the low to mid 80s so far, that could kind of shock it a little bit. So I like to plant them a little later in the late afternoon, early evening as the sun is going down. It's not quite so warm. And it gives them a little bit of time to acclimate to the temperatures. So that's my suggestion is don't do it in the heat of the day. Do it when it's a little cooler.
Plant with falling temperatures, I guess.
Mm-hmm. And I would also plant them a little deep. If you've heard about transplanting tomatoes into the garden, plant them deeply and they can develop roots in the stem that's under the ground. Peppers will kind of do the same thing, not as vigorously, but I would suggest planting them up to maybe the first leaf, and you can still get some roots to develop at those nodes. And I learned that from, I think it was the New Mexico State University Chili Institute. They were talking about actually mounding soil around the base of the pepper plant to give it a little more stability, and it can develop a few roots in that soil.
So is a general rule of thumb then to transplant them about 1 to 2 inches deeper than the root ball?
Yeah, I would think so. I would go up to the first leaf. So whether it's where the cotyledon or that the seed leaf was, or if it's a real leggy plant, you could go up to the first true leaf. In fact, I did that. My peppers went in yesterday, which is earlier than usual, but we're warm enough. And I had a couple of them that had some damage on the lower leaves, and so I actually plucked those off and planted it up to the first leaf. So we'll see how they go.
Are their roots very sensitive? So should you handle them carefully, or can you loosen up those roots when you take it out of your small container to go into the ground?
I generally am not very gentle with peppers, just as I am with tomatoes. I'll have a toothpick or a skewer or something, and I will prick out the roots if it's starting to get root bound in the container that it was growing in. I'll prick those out, and I'll even cut off a few of the long roots if on the bottom. And I have not noticed any issues. They seem to respond very well, unlike the vegetables in the cucurbit family, melon, squash. They don't like to have their roots disturbed, but it seems like peppers can tolerate a bit of, pricking out their roots. So you don't have to be too gentle.
What about the idea of adding magnesium to the hole and working that in before transplanting? I'm not sure what magnesium would add other than magnesium.
Yeah, not sure. I generally don't add a lot of anything. I prepare my bed with pelleted chicken manure. So it's like a 4-3-2 fertilizer. So it's a complete fertilizer. It's not balanced, but it's complete. And I add compost. So I like to prep my beds prior to planting. What I occasionally will do is sprinkle a little bit of a fertility mix that I make up that happens to be blood meal, bone meal, rock phosphate, green sand, kelp. I like to have that handy to mix in with some of my potting soil. So if I have anything going into a container, I'll add some of that. But occasionally I'll put a little bit in the bottom of the hole in my raised bed if I think they might need just a little boost of something, especially if not deep green. So there might be a little bit of a nutritional issue going on.
A fertility mix. Do you do it during a full moon around a maypole?
Not that kind of fertility, Fred.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, this is one, it's just all organic items that I found a recipe years ago, and I just keep a can of it in my greenhouse, and I'll mix it in with potting soil because often potting soil doesn't have a lot of fertility. And occasionally I'll mix it in the whole planting hole in my raised bed.
If there is one mistake that a lot of beginning gardeners make, and it's due to their excitement and planting a garden, is they tend to crowd their plants a little too close together. What is the proper spacing for a pepper plant?
I'd say at least 2 feet. The plants on peppers tend to not get really large like a tomato. They can get huge. Generally, they're 24 inches, maybe 30 inches tall. And I like to grow them in those cone-shaped, quote, tomato cages. They're not really tomato cages. They're better for peppers to give them some stability because the stems are a little bit brittle. But I like to have good air circulation because there is the possibility that peppers can get a powdery mildew in the middle of summer if the air circulation isn't good. So I think it's always best to not crowd any plant. You want good air circulation. And if they're crowded, if you've planted them too close together, then they're competing for nutrients and water. So I'd say probably at least 2 feet is a good spacing for peppers.
You mentioned that you use the chicken pellets, that you work them into the hole before planting. What is your fertilizing regimen with peppers throughout the season?
I like to give them a diluted liquid fertilizer, which would be fish emulsion. Sometimes I'll add a little bit of liquid kelp in it and dilute it according to the bottle directions. And the most important time to fertilize peppers are as they're flowering and when fruit is starting to develop. That's the most critical time. And also the most critical time to keep them well irrigated. They don't want to be too wet, but you don't want them to dry out too. Then with those kinds of conditions, you can run into blossom end rot, which is a calcium deficiency caused by irregular watering.
Mm-hmm.
Most critical to have deep, infrequent watering, depending on your soil and how much you mulch, but especially during flowering and fruit set.
Yeah, that wet, dry cycle, not too many plants enjoy that. In fact, I think peppers are fairly intolerant of that. So I guess the bottom line is keeping the root zone evenly moist.
Correct, yeah. And if you use a good organic mulch like chopped up leaves, shredded leaves, or straw would be a good mulch. It would insulate the soil. It will keep the roots from getting too hot. It will keep the soil from drying out too quickly. So I think several inches of mulch is ideal for peppers and any of our summer vegetable crops.
Do you subscribe to the theory about pinching the early blossoms?
Well, there's some controversy about that. I've always heard that you don't want any flowers or fruit on it. So I would always pick those off. But then I read a couple of articles. I think one of them was by the garden professors of several years ago that said, well, you're just eliminating your first crop. So I'm kind of vacillating on that. My plants right now that will be going into the ground tomorrow, some of them have flowers on them. Some of them I have been pinching the flowers off. Maybe I'm doing an informal experiment here to see if there's a difference because I have 2 plants of each variety. I don't know. I have one of my pepper plants that I put in my own garden a couple of days ago, and it already has a pepper on it, and I left it. So we'll see. There's kind of mixed feelings on whether or not you should pinch the flowers and the fruit.
Yeah, I'm not too concerned about those early flowers, especially if when you're planting it into the ground, it has flowers. Chances are the stress going through that plant after getting planted, those flowers are going to fall off anyway.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Another thing that can cause pepper flowers to fall off, and we hear this a lot come June, and people don't understand why they're not seeing any peppers on their plants. Temperatures can really play a big part on whether that pollen becomes viable or not, because if nighttime temperatures are over 70 or daytime temperatures are over 85, good luck.
Yeah, a good rule of thumb is if it's going to be 90 degrees for a stretch, the pollen on peppers, tomatoes, and some other of your vegetable crops could dry up before the fruit gets fertilized, before there's pollination and fertilization. So during that stretch of time, I think it's a good practice maybe to put some shade cloth out to keep it a little bit cooler. But 90 degrees seems to kind of be the threshold, 85 to 90. And that's our typical summer here in the Sacramento area, is we pretty much have days on end where it's over 90 degrees.
Shade cloth over peppers, you're talking about extending it over the top of the plant to allow pollinating insects to get in there to pollinate the plant?
Yeah, I would say you only need to maybe clip it to some lath or some kind of poles to shade it from the south and the west side for that hot afternoon sun. It could be over the top a little bit, but I wouldn't put it right over the plant. Peppers tend to be self-pollinating, but they can also get pollinated by insects. So I wouldn't completely cover the plant. I would have it up high where insects can get in there. And it's a good idea to allow insects in there, to allow room for that, because there's a lot of beneficial insects that could get in there and then help control aphids, whiteflies, other insects that aren't good for pepper plants. So I don't think you want to completely exclude any insects. You want the shade cloth up high enough. And it doesn't have to be a real heavy shade cloth. It could be something with 30 or 50%. But yeah, just to give it some afternoon shade and maybe a few degrees of cooling.
I would think if insects are getting in there to pollinate and you have hot peppers nearby, there could be some cross-pollination going on. But would that affect this year's crop, or would it affect the seeds if you tried to save the seeds from those?
It should not affect this year's crop. And I think a lot of people think they can't grow a hot pepper next to a sweet pepper because they'll get cross-pollinated and the sweet pepper will then become hot. It's only the seeds inside that fruit that will show the crossing. So if you had a chili next to a sweet pepper, they got cross-pollinated, you saved the seeds from the sweet pepper, planted it out next year, it could be hot if it got crossed with that hot pepper.
And I guess if you are in the habit of saving seeds, maybe another strategy might be to put the hot peppers downwind from the sweet peppers.
That way, or isolate them some way, put it in a different part of the yard. You could bag it, do some self-pollinating, yourself with a little paintbrush or whatever utensil you want, but you could do that. But I would do isolation. Or if I'm saving seed, I will only grow sweet peppers. I won't grow a hot pepper if I know I'm going to save seed this year.
That's the best advice of all, probably. Now, when it comes to feeding the plant during the year, I imagine it's like a lot of summertime vegetables. You want sort of a balanced fertilizer, and you especially want to avoid putting on too much nitrogen.
Right, because too much nitrogen is going to put on a lot of tender foliage, and that can attract aphids, and aphids can spread viruses in pepper plants. So anything that's more of a low nitrogen, I wouldn't put on a bunch of blood meal or something that's high nitrogen. It's not needed throughout the summer. You just want a balanced, low organic fertilizer.
All right. And then what you would do that, about every 3 weeks or so?
It could be, to say, I usually do it mostly when it's flowering and setting fruit, but you don't need to do it too often. And often the plant will tell you if it needs some fertilization. If the leaves, they're kind of not as bright, dark green as they should be, it may tell you that it needs a little bit of fertilization. So, but if you've prepared the bed well beforehand, before you've planted, you may not need to add much fertilization throughout the growing season if the plant's doing well.
When you're feeding your plants during the season, you mentioned you like to use fish emulsion, maybe a little bit of seaweed. That's a liquid fertilizer. And, you can try to apply it closer to the ground. But chances are, I use fish emulsion every year, and I tend to apply it over the plant, just sort of wash the leaves off, if you will. And some may consider that foliar feeding. Is that going on?
Could be. I tend to do more of a soil drench right at the roots. I don't do foliar feeding, but there's no reason you couldn't. I would be sure to not apply it to the foliage if it's a hot afternoon. That could stress the plant. You could even burn the leaves a little bit. So I would do it maybe in the cooler part of the day. But that's also one way to help wash off white flies or aphids if you have them on your plant, is do the foliar feeding, do a drench over the top of your plant, however you're applying the liquid fertilizer. I don't see any problem with that. I tend to do just more of a soil drench.
And at harvest time, how do you harvest your peppers?
With pruners. I do not pull them off. The branches are very brittle. And if you just try to snap it off the bush, you could take the whole branch with it. So sharp pair of pruners, cut off, you leave a little bit of a stem, and yeah, that works perfect.
Right. Don't pull it. Don't twist it. Cut it.
Right. Cut it.
Leave a little bit of the stem. You want to start the backyard fruit and nut orchard of your dreams, but maybe you don't know where to begin. Or maybe you're currently growing fruit and nut trees and you've got a million questions, such as what are the tastiest fruits to grow? Where can I go to buy some of these delectable fruit and nut trees you've been reading about? And then how do you care for all of these trees, including planting, pruning, and harvesting? I've got one online stop in mind for you where all these questions you might have will get answered. It's davewilson.com. That's Dave Wilson Nursery, the nation's largest wholesaler of fruit and nut trees for the backyard garden. They have planting tips, taste test results, and links to nurseries in your area that carry Dave Wilson fruit trees. Click on the Home Garden tab at davewilson.com for all of these links, including a link to their years of informative videos about growing fruit and nut trees that they've posted on the Dave Wilson Nursery YouTube channel. Start the backyard orchard of your dreams at davewilson.com. All right, let's get to the good stuff. The peppers to grow, the varieties of peppers that you may want to grow. Some people like sweet peppers. Some people like warmer peppers. Some people like hot peppers. The choice is yours, folks. The choice is yours. I've grown plenty of peppers over the years, of ranging from 0 Scoville units up to several thousand Scoville units. Scoville unit is a heat measurement system devised back in the early 20th century that allegedly measured heat. I think from what I was reading about it, it was really more of a case of human survival from people who had to go through all those tastings.
As I had mentioned, my tongue does not like the heat, so I tend to not grow anything with much heat at all. They're mostly sweet. But I do like to grow a jalapeno occasionally, just to help spice up a dish, and my husband does like chilies. So the one that I like to grow every year is called jalapeno. It's an All-America Selection winner. It's good for a container. I grow it in a hanging basket, and it has little 1 to 2 inch, maybe not even that big, of jalapeno peppers, typical jalapeno heat. Then I also grow one for myself called Tricked You. So it's a good size jalapeno that has no heat. So it's been bred where the heat has been taken out of it. But yeah, I really enjoy growing a variety of different types of sweet peppers, whether they're small pimentos, whether they're great, big, huge ones like Red Impact is one that we've been growing the last year or two. It's an All-America Selection winner, and it's huge, red, thick-walled, about 6 inches long. Or I like sheep nose pimento that's a tiny little 1 to 2 inch flat and thick-walled. So a real variety and different colors. They tend to almost always start out green or pale yellow or even purple in the green stage, but they then tend to ripen either orange or red. So yeah, I do love sweet bells.
I'm very fond of sweet peppers, as is my wife, and we have them during the summer and through the early fall, probably as a side dish to dinner just about every night. And why not? Some of my favorites over the years, I think, as long as I've been growing peppers, I think the two that have been in the garden for decades are Flamingo and Gypsy. They're very similar looking. Flamingo is a harder one to find. I think only Harris Seed Company carries it.
Never heard of Flamingo. Wow. Okay, I'll have to look for it.
Yeah, as far as I know, it's only available from Harris Seed, but it's very similar to Gypsy. And I really like the Gypsy pepper too because of the wonderful color changes that the Gypsy goes through.
And I grow Gypsy every year as well. It's a All-America Selection winner from the early 80s, I think. So it's been around a long time. I like it because it's a little smaller. Often I don't want to use a huge bell in a recipe. I maybe use a piece of it. Well, with Gypsy, it's small enough I can use the whole pepper, and they're kind of pointed and they're cute, and they mature from kind of a greenish yellow to a kind of a deep reddish orange, and we grow it every year. It's a great pepper.
One of the peppers that has a little bit of heat to it, and it too was an All-America Selections winner, as are a lot of my favorites. That's always a good chart to go to. If you go to All-America Selections and look at their list of pepper winners, you're sure to find one you're going to like. But the Mariachi, which has only a little bit of heat, I'd call it more of a spice than a heat, about 500 to 600 Scoville units. It's a cone-shaped pepper, about 4 inches long, 2 inches wide. It starts out green, then ripens through yellow to rose-colored to red. And it can get hotter if the weather gets hotter, too. So keep that in mind.
Right. I think we grew that a number of years ago out at the Fair Oaks Horticulture Center. It hasn't been on my radar lately. I think I should look it up. But one of them that we're growing this year that's an All-America Selection winner that does have just a little bit of heat, it's a hybrid pepper called Mexibel. So it looks like the typical blocky bell pepper, but it's small, probably 2 inches in diameter maybe. And it's supposed to have a Scoville unit of 100 to 1,000. So there's always a range on those Scoville heat units. So it does have a little bit of heat, but we haven't grown that one in quite some time. So that's one we're going to do this year.
I think my favorite pepper, though, of all time has to be the tequila, which is it's an amethyst pepper from Holland. It's lavender in color. It not only has that beautiful purple-like color, but the aroma of it is just wonderful. The fruit sets early. It's a blocky bell type, about 4.5 inches deep, 4 inches across. It begins as lavender and stays that color for a long time, and then it fades to a lovely orange and then finally to red. And it is certainly edible through all those stages. Very attractive, very virus resistant as well, tolerant to blossom end rot. It ripens in about 72 days, and I am always planting tequila.
Well, I grew to years ago when I first started growing peppers, and it's another one that fell off my radar until this year when we were trying to come up with the varieties that would grow at the Fair Oaks Horticulture Center. Tequila somehow rose to the top, and so I bought seeds for that. So we are going to be growing it this year, and you're right, it's a beautiful pepper. There are times when it has kind of a goldy and purple coloration all at the same time. So I had forgotten about it. So I'm glad we're growing it again this year.
Another one of my favorites, and I used to hold pepper parties. This is how crazy I was. We would invite a house full of people or a yard full of people, really. And we would lay out all the peppers and all the samples, and people could sample it. And usually there was alcohol involved, but what else is new? But it was a wonderful time. It was a wonderful party. The old Farmer Fred pepper parties. The one that would win year after year in this amateur competition was one with a little bit of heat, about 500 to 1,000 Scoville units, the New Mex Joey Parker. And that is one that I've stuck with over the years as well.
So your pepper tasting party was not just sweet peppers. There were some that had some heat.
And they were all clearly labeled.
So if they were really, really hot, they would know to avoid it if they couldn't eat those. That sounds pretty fun. I've had melon tastings and tomato tastings, but it has not occurred to me to have a pepper tasting.
Oh, yeah, they're quite fun. But here's a pro tip for you. If you eat a hot pepper accidentally and it starts to burn your mouth, don't drink water.
Drink milk.
Whole milk, by the way.
Whole milk. Okay, I'll keep that in mind.
Not non-fat milk, but whole milk or whole ice cream. So no Dairy Queen.
I was going to say, would vanilla ice cream work? That would work for me. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And that will, stop the heat from spreading. But the New Mex Joey Parker, it's about 6 to 7 inches long. They're very thick-fleshed starts out green, turns to red. And again, it's mild to medium in flavor, but it ripens earlier than most other peppers, about 65 days. And again, if you're making salsas or homemade nachos, which at a pepper party, you're going to have a lot of nachos, New Mex Joey Parker was very popular.
So is that kind of an Anaheim type? I mean, long and skinny?
Yeah, it's less heat than an Anaheim. But about the same shape. There's a lot of New Mex peppers, but the New Mex Joey Parker was a winner, as was the New Mex Big Jim over the time. By the way, speaking of Jim, the Jimmy Nardello, which is just an excellent Italian pepper, is one of my favorites for grilling. They get about 10 to 12 inches long, and the plants get about 2 feet tall. That they go from bright green to red, and they fry up beautifully. It's a wonderful frying pepper. It was originally from the Basilicata region of South Italy.
That is one that we tend to grow every year. And sheep-nosed pimento.
What else do you grow at the Fair Oaks Horticulture Center?
You mean peppers?
For peppers.
For peppers. Well, this year we're growing, besides the Gypsy and the tequila, we're also doing a couple of other All-America Selection winners. Orange Blaze is one. It's a nice orange blocky bell pepper. Red Impact that I mentioned earlier. It's that long 6-inch thick-walled pepper. Candy cane chocolate cherry would be beautiful in an edible landscape. So it's a real attractive looking plant. So not only are the leaves variegated green and kind of a cream colored, but even the peppers are red with kind of chocolatey stripes on it. It's a kind of thin-walled, so it's not a thick-walled pepper, but it's just beautiful. And then one for us, it's a new All-America Selection winner called Pick and Pop Yellow. And it's short, probably about 18, 20 inches tall, so it would be good in a container. Bright yellow, kind of elongated, pointed peppers. And I would say kind of personal sized.
Do you ever grow hot peppers at the Fair Oaks Horticulture Center?
We're doing 4 really hot chilies. I think we're going to grow them in a container. And one is called the Orange Habanero, Trinidad Scorpion, Ghost Pepper, and Jalafuego. The hottest one would be the Trinidad Scorpion, which is 1.2 million Scoville heat units. So we've got some pretty hot ones we're going to be growing out there. Give them a try. Some people really like their hot chilies.
Whoa. Do you have an armed guard standing next to them?
Yeah, I'm not sure how we're going to keep people from snatching them and, popping them in their mouth.
Oh, don't even say that. Yeah.
I know.
Wow.
We have a master gardener who really likes to grow chilies, and so we like to showcase a lot of different things. So we'll have a big container that's got these really hot chilies in it.
I have grown Jalafuego. I like it. It's good. But my favorite, I guess you'd call it a hot pepper. It depends on your taste buds, of course. It's called Inferno, which is actually an Hungarian wax pepper, but it has enough heat to let you know, yeah, I'm hot, but it also has this wonderful taste that still comes through. In a lot of situations where you're eating hot peppers, all you get is heat. But if you want some taste to go along with that heat, try the Inferno. Again, it's a Hungarian hot wax pepper variety, about 5,000 to 10,000 Scoville units.
Well, I know that the All-America Selection winner several years ago, they had a habanero that had no heat. It was the first time I was able to actually taste a habanero because it's been too hot for me to taste. But Roulette is a no heat variety of habanero. So I was able to taste that citrusy flavor that it has. So it was quite interesting because having never had a habanero before, I quite like the flavor. I can do without the heat, but having this variety that has no heat really was amazing to me.
So if you want to be assured, folks, of zero heat, if you're really adamant about your sweet peppers, well, stick with your bell peppers, the Yolo Wonder, the California Wonder. I like some Italian ones like Corno di Toro. Those are excellent 0 Scoville unit varieties to grow. There's a lot of sweet peppers out there. And again, if you want slightly hot peppers, I would tend to go with the New Mex Joey Parker. You like that roulette pepper that had no heat. There is
Yeah, habanero with no heat, right.
yeah, there's a tricky one out there called shishito. And
Oh, yeah. I grew that one year, and I think they say 1 out of 10 will be spicy. Well, every one of mine was spicy, so I don't know. When you eat one that doesn't have the heat in it, it's very tasty. It's really a delicious pepper. It's just you are playing roulette on which one is going to be hot.
I finally got some insight into this shishito mystery, why half the plant might be sweet and the other half might be hot. It has to do with the age and the direction of the fruit. If the shishito pepper is facing south or west, it's getting more heat. It's becoming a hotter pepper. Also, the older the pepper gets, if it turns from green to red, the red pepper has a good chance of being hot. Whereas the green shishito on the north side of the plant probably will not have the heat.
Good to know. So I wonder if you grew a shishito pepper plant in a little less sun. It sounds like a good experiment to try to see how that would work. But I know they need sun to develop the fruit, but maybe in an area of the yard that gets a little less sun. That could be kind of fun to try. Yeah, and I'm thinking of a place it's actually on the east side of my house, and I have a stock tank there where I grow something every year, and it would get sun until like 1 o'clock in the afternoon, so it would get the morning sun. That'd be fun to try. I think I'll put that on my list to do.
There you go. Just keep that milk and ice cream handy.
Vanilla ice cream, yes, always handy.
All right. Peppers, grow them. They're actually fairly easy to grow, and they will, here in USDA Zone 9, especially here in the Central Valley of California, they will produce, easily from late June all the way through November or December.
Oh, easily. I did notice we have a community garden right next to the Fair Oaks Horticulture Center. And one of the gardeners there, actually a couple of them, had peppers until about 2 months ago. Looked terrible, but they did still have the fruit on them. So as long as we don't get a freeze, because they can't handle that cold weather, the plants can still produce. I don't know what the quality would be on fruit that goes through a winter, but it's amazing that they were able to continue the plants alive and producing fruit.
That's a discussion for another day, is how to overwinter a pepper plant, because a lot of hot pepper heads like to plant their hot peppers in containers and grow them for 2 years and basically overwinter them indoors for the second year, and then bring them outside when the weather warms up and they get somewhat of a crop.
Yeah, I think I also heard that at the Chili Institute at the New Mexico State University. I was probably on one of your shows many years ago where they were talking about doing that, pot it up, keep it in the garage. It's going to look terrible all winter, but then bring it out and you'll get a good crop the following year. I've not ever tried that. It sounds like another fun experiment to do.
And if you want to hear that conversation on an old episode of the Garden Basics podcast, go back to episode 25 back in July of 2020. And we talked to Dave DeWitt about overwintering pepper plants. So you can give that a listen in episode 25.
One thing we didn't talk about, and maybe that's another episode, was peppers tend to not have very many pests, but the typical ones are white flies and aphids. I had an outbreak of giant white fly last year, and it was the most weird thing I ever saw. I had took pictures of it, and I researched what the heck could this be, and it's the giant white fly, and it looked like white beard was growing out of my pepper leaves. It was the strangest thing.
What'd you do for it?
I picked the leaves off, for one thing, after I took pictures. It said that the giant whitefly, if the infestation is bad enough, it can't kill the plant. And I almost think it was on Gypsy last year. And my plant didn't do well. In fact, I may have taken the plant out after a while. But I had never seen the giant whitefly. It was the weirdest thing. It looked like 2 or 3 inch long white beard growing out of the leaf. It was just weird. But peppers tend to not have as many issues as, tomatoes and things like that. But this was the strangest thing I'd ever seen. And of course, there's always leaf miners and things like that. And one thing I wanted to mention, about 7 or 8 years ago, a home gardener brought in a bell pepper that had mining. If you know what leaf miners look like, mining in the leaves, this was mining in the fruit. And I had contacted Dr. Kimsey out at the Bohart Museum at UC Davis. I said, what do you think this could be? I said, I did a little bit of research and I was wondering if it was Tuta absoluta. That's a strange name, but that's the scientific name for the South American tomato miner. And she told me that California is on the lookout for this. It has spread all through the Mediterranean and European countries, and it's a matter of time before it comes to California. But it's a miner in the fruit, also in the leaves, but mostly in the fruit, and it can devastate the crop. And it turns out that it was not Tuta absoluta. It was a different leaf miner, according to the professor for entomology at UC Davis. Well, then just a couple years ago, one of our master gardeners had picked a red bell pepper that had the same mining in it. And I know that we're on the lookout for it. So I got in touch with Dr. Kimsey again at the Bohart Museum. And she had sent all the information to the California Department of Food and Ag because they're on the lookout for this thing. They decided it was the citrus peel miner. So it's a miner that is not just in the leaves, but it's in the peel of citrus. It also gets on peppers. So that's something that we're kind of on the lookout for because it will eventually get here and it will be devastating, apparently, to not only tomatoes, South American tomato leaf miner, Tuta absoluta, and it's a serious threat to California. And most leaf miners are the larva of a small fly. This is the caterpillar of a moth. Looks a lot like the adult tomato pinworm or the adult potato tuber worm. So it's going to be real difficult to identify. It is going to be a serious problem if it does make it to California, which it will eventually, probably.
Is this
probably more information than you wanted to know.
No, I want to know more. Is this a cosmetic issue? Can you just cut it out and eat the rest?
No, they say in tomatoes, it devastates the crop. It's total crop failure, apparently, in places where it's become quite prevalent. So that's why the California Department of Food and Ag is really concerned about it and has a lot of things going on to try to, to track it, to see where it is, inspections and things like that. But how this thing usually will get into California would be someone would inadvertently bring a tomato from a country that had the Tuta in it, that type of thing. So it'll get here eventually.
The one that was in the pepper, though, is it the tomato one or is it the citrus miner?
No, it still wasn't. The second one that was about 3 or 4 years ago that our master gardener had found, according to the California Department of Food and Ag, it was not. It was the citrus peel miner. So they could tell just by looking at the mining trails and the excrement that's in the trails, that kind of thing, that it was the citrus peel miner.
All right.
So it's still not Tuta absoluta yet, but it's definitely a miner. That was not a big problem on this particular pepper plant. It was apparently on just a couple of the bell peppers. And we always got a bunch of mining in the leaves. There are leaf miners that get in pepper leaves all the time, but because we don't harvest the leaves, it's not a big deal. That's mostly just cosmetic on the plant. And if the plant is vigorous enough and you've watered it well and fertilized it and keep it healthy, the leaf miners tend to not be that big of a problem on the plant. Now, it's a problem if it's on a crop where you harvest the leaves, so Swiss chard or lettuce or spinach. Then you've got a big problem. But on something where we're harvesting the fruit, it's generally not a problem. Tuta, however, gets on the fruit and devastates the fruit.
But only on tomatoes.
On tomatoes, but it can get on peppers as well.
Okay.
Yeah. So, it's called the tomato leaf miner, but it apparently can get on peppers as well.
And it's not just a leaf miner, it's a fruit miner.
Yeah. Apparently.
Wow, that's too bad because Tuta absoluta would be a great name for a band.
I know. Yeah, a good name for a really bad problem.
Gail Pothour, vegetable expert, Sacramento County Master Gardener. Thanks for enlightening us about peppers today.
My pleasure, Fred.
We talked about a lot of great pepper varieties in today's podcast, and in the current Beyond the Garden Basics newsletter, we go into greater detail about those outstanding pepper varieties, along with pictures and seed sources for those peppers. It's available to both free and paid subscribers to the Beyond the Garden Basics newsletter. Now, if you're not a paid subscriber, well, here's what you missed in last Monday's premium edition. We had a special podcast with Debbie Flower. We visited a nursery and talked about all the snail and slug control products that are available, which ones are the most effective, and which are the safest ones to use around pets and children. Also, I write about some of the most aromatic plants to have in your yard, and what are the best roses for a real show for the nose. Those 3-foot-tall metal cones that nurseries sell as tomato cages, oh, forget about those. They're great for peppers, though. Those little cages aren't big enough for the vast majority of tomato plants. We show you what a real tomato cage looks like. The biggest mistake lawn owners make? It's an easy adjustment that will make your lawn healthier and more drought tolerant. We talk about how to thwart drainage problems that can vex potted plants, and we have a quick remedy. We also have a more natural way to improve the overall health of your garden soil. All of that was in last Monday's special premium newsletter and exclusive for paid subscribers to the Beyond the Garden Basics newsletter. And paid subscribers can also check out the entire catalog of past Beyond the Garden Basics newsletters, something that's not available to free subscribers. But if you are subscribing for free, you'll still have access to the complete current Friday newsletter that is released each week, just like the current one, which is all about the pepper varieties we talked about in this podcast. Find out more about the Beyond the Garden Basics newsletter. There's a link in today's show notes, as well as at gardenbasics.net or farmerfred.com, or you can just do an internet search for the Beyond the Garden Basics newsletter. Thanks for reading, listening, and subscribing. Garden Basics with Farmer Fred comes out every Friday, and it's brought to you by Dave Wilson Nursery. Garden Basics is available wherever podcasts are handed out. For more information about the podcast, as well as an accurate transcript of the podcast, visit our website, gardenbasics.net. And thank you so much for listening and your support.